Okay, so let's go through the standard Drupal 8 install. We haven't created our database yet, but we'll get to that in a second. Excellent. Okay, so we don't have a files directory, so let's create one. So where does that directory belong? It belongs in the site's default folder. So if we go to cd sites default, sure enough we do not have the files directory, so let's create that. Make directory files. Now I'm running on Ubuntu 16 at the moment, so we're looking at Ubuntu 16.04. That's what this laptop is running on at the moment, and by default Ubuntu runs as the www data user. This is important because depending on how you have your Apache web server set up, it may or may not be able to access the files folder. So if I have created it now, so if we refresh, it's still complaining that it's there and it's not writable. But if we change that to the correct owner, so we'll do change owner www data of the files folder, and oops, I nearly clicked that link. Yes, I did. Accident. Then if I refresh, okay, so the www data user does have write permissions to that folder. It may be the case that your user already has access to write to that folder. It depends on your Apache configuration, but by default, if you change it to the www data user, you will probably be able to access and write to that folder. And this is the standard required step with Drupal. We now have to create a settings.php folder, file. So what we'll do is we'll copy the existing one, the default settings, into settings, a new file called settings.php. So now we have that file, settings.php, and again we'll change the owner to wdata. And we'll refresh. And we're good to go. So now it's able to read the settings folder, it's got the files folder, and we need a database. So let's create a database for Drupal to live in. So we'll log on to our MySQL instance. MySQL, user will log in as root. There we go. So we will create a user and a database for that user. So I always forget the commands for this, so what we'll do is we'll do create database first, because I can always remember that one, and we'll call it the name of this website folder. So we'll call it Tom Sutton Heating. Database Tom Sutton Heating. Error. I should not have to put quotes around there. There we go, so we've created the database successfully. So we'll put the database name in there, and I'll create a user with the same username. There we go. So that didn't create it, so what we have to do is create the user. So I'll type in help create user, and here we have the help file for MySQL. So this is built in, so it saves a Google. So often you might just Google this, but you've actually got the help files built into MySQL. So it's telling us how to create this user. So to create a user on MySQL, you do create user, and we've decided that the user will be called Tom Sutton Heating at localhost. Now remember to put the little apostrophes around each one, and then we'll put identified by. Now I'll copy identified because I always spell identified wrong. Identify, and we'll do the awful thing, and we'll set a password to password. Do not do this normally, and we won't set an expiration of this password. Okay, so we've created the user. Now we need to grant access for this user to the database we created. Let's see what happens if we don't do that step. So remember, we've got a database called Tom Sutton Heating, and we've got a user called Tom Sutton Heating. but Tom needs to have access to that database, and we've not done that yet. So when we try and save and continue, it should fail. It does. Failed to connect, and the message was access denied for Thompson Heater localhost. So let's give him permission. So we'll do help grant. Grant is the phrase that we need to use to grant access to a user. And what we have to type in is grant all on database name, which is Tom Sutton Heating, dot star, which means all tables within that database, to the username, which is also Tom Sutton Heating, and then localhost. And that limits the requests to only allow to become from the localhost. Excellent. So what that has done is it's told MySQL that the user Tom Sutton Heating is allowed to do all operations on the Tom Sutton Heating database coming from the localhost. Now, I've never done this personally, but you can limit, and I'm not sure whether Drupal would allow you to, because of the way Drupal works. It lets people create tables on the fly and things like that. You can limit users with MySQL to not allow them to create tables, for example, or not allow them to delete tables. So you might have a user with very limited privileges, which is only allowed to do selects. So you could alter this command and say grant select on Tom Sutton Heating users, for example, if there was a users table, and that would give access to Tom to have the select permission on the users table. But if he tried to do a drop or a truncate to delete data from the database, he would be denied. But by issuing the command above, grant all, what we have said is Tom Sutton, the user Tom Sutton, is allowed to do absolutely anything he likes on the database Tom Sutton Heating to any table. That's what that command means. Okay, so let's type in the password and save and continue. And right now my hard drive is going like Billy-O, wearing away, creating all those various database tables. And if we have a look at the usage of my computer at the moment, we should be able to see MySQL. There it is, MySQL, doing all the work. OBS is the video capture software that I'm using at the moment. There we go. I do not have an SSD in this computer. I used to have one on my old laptop, and I highly recommend it if you're doing local web development, because it makes your life a lot faster. So what that's doing now is creating all the various database tables that Drupal needs in order to function. We won't save that. So here we go. And while we're waiting for that, we can actually log in as Tom, request a password, to be asked for a password, and his password is password. Okay, and we can show databases. So we're logged in as Tom Sutton at the moment, and of course there's just the one table, Tom Sutton Heating. Information schema holds metadata about the databases for that. I'm going to say for that user, but I'm not entirely sure if that's just for that user. It stores data about data in the database, if you will. So we can use that database. And see how we've got the progress of Drupal doing all of its various table creations. We can do show tables. This is what's actually going on in the background right now. So we can see already it's created a batch table, various cache tables, config table, router, queue, semaphore, etc. This is what's going on in the background as Drupal installs. Let's have a quick sneak peek at the users table. So we'll do a describe of the users table. So a very simple table. It's got user ID, unique ID, and the language code. Let's see if there's anything in there. Let's just select we'll select everything. So we've just got 2 users at the moment. And let's see what's in semaphore. So semaphore is a way of controlling concurrency. So for example, you might be doing a delicate operation like deleting a file, and you don't want someone else to be deleting the same file or editing the same file at the same time. So it's a way of locking things, locking operations. Select all from, let's describe it first. Describe semaphore. So the name, value, expire. So semaphores expire. If they didn't expire, then that would be a problem because something would become locked all the time. So we'll do a select all from semaphore. There we go, nothing in the semaphore table at the moment. And let's do a describe of the router. Okay, so this is where all the various paths are stored in Drupal. So we've got name of the path, the name of it, where the path is, route, number of parts. Let's have a look if there's any in there at the moment. Wow, so there's 160 routes by default in a Drupal install, and we're still installing. Oh gosh, it's going up and up. So there's 217 now. Let's have a look at a few of them. Select all from routes, limit to 10. Is it called route or routes? Router. There we go. Right, that's quite hard to read, so let's just not select all of them. So we'll just do a describe to describe the table, and we'll select name and path from router. Wow, look at all these. That was all 200 of them. I forgot to do the limit. We'll limit to 20. Now you don't have the limit command on Windows, so Microsoft SQL, but you do have the top query, and that's something that the object relational mapper would help you with, so doctrine. So there are different ways of doing SQL commands, but as a user of the doctrine library, for example, all of that difference is abstracted. So perhaps you come from a Microsoft SQL background, or perhaps you come from a MySQL background, or a DB2 background, which is a IBM database system. They all have slightly different ways of writing SQL, which is a query language, so structured query language. And what an object relational mapper does is it says, here's the single way of doing it, and we will deal with the complication of translating that into different database systems. Looks like we're nearly done. 93%. I see. So the second entry in the router table is the front, which is a way of referring to the front home page of a website, and it's currently set to the root address. So that's got to 100% now. So let's see. Let's just exit out MySQL, clear the screen, and yes, gosh. So the computer's working away. So let's create the site name. We'll call it Tom Sutton Heating. Tom Sutton Heating. There we go. And we'll say the email address is just tom@example.com. And we'll create a username of admin with a password. Highly predictable there. and we'll set the country to the United Kingdom, and we will save and continue. So remember, what we're doing here was going to take this website, which is written just in standard PHP, there's no framework being used, and we're going to port it to a Drupal 8 site. This is learning out loud, so we're just going through the rigmarole of finding out how it works, and we'll be diving into the Drupal Twig help pages and exploring how we might go about that. Editing this video is going to be fun. I'm going to have to cut out a lot of mistakes, no doubt, but I'll keep in the mistakes because other people will probably benefit from if they run into them as well. So that will be helpful, I think, to share. So there we go. Right, we've got our Drupal 8 site. So let's step back for a moment and think, this is where we want to get to. Gosh, the lag on my computer right now. So we want to take this site and make it into a Drupal site.